Well, welcome everyone to our Tree Week webinar series. Today we are joined by Laurie Thomas, who's here at the University of Kentucky in the Extension, Forestry, and Natural Resources group. Laurie wears a lot of different hats, from working with youth to directing the Master Naturalist program with me, to being a forester by training. And today, Laurie is going to be talking with us about identifying Kentucky's trees. But if you're just joining us today for the first time, welcome to our Tree Week series. We've got webinars every day of Tree Week, which is, of course, a week in which we celebrate and recognize all things tree. So with that, I want to turn things over to Laurie.
All right. Thank you, Ellen. I appreciate it. Yes, and happy Tree Week, everyone. I'll pull up my PowerPoint and get us started here. Does that look good? Well, hold on. There we go. How's that, Ellen? We good?
Let's see. It's thinking I see it. And if you've got questions, feel free to put those in either the Q&A or the chat, and I'll raise those to Laurie when we get to the question break. But looks great.
Great. Well, I'm so glad to have all of you all joining us today for Tree Week. What a fantastic week. As Dr. Crocker said, there is so much going on. I'm glad you could take the time today to join us to learn a little bit about identifying Kentucky's trees. We are, as we started early on, a very diverse state. And so tree identification can be a little tricky here. And so today I'll walk you through using the tool that should help you learn to identify trees. In our presentation overview, I'm going to start off with the importance of trees. We all kind of know this. We've probably heard it many times before, but I think it's a really nice place to start. Then we're going to look at some leaf characteristics, because right now we're going to really start with tree identification using tree leaves, since we still have them. Easiest place to start. Then I'm going to show you a dichotomous key. If you've never used one, this is a great tool to help you learn to identify trees or lots of other organisms. And then talk a little bit about practice, and then some tree ID resources, both online and paper versions, that could be helpful to you. So we'll start off with trees. Did you all know there are more than 70,000 tree species worldwide, which is amazing. And they estimate that there's tree species that we haven't even identified yet. In Kentucky alone, we have over 120 plus native tree species that we find out in our woods. And a lot of that has to do with, we're such a diverse state. We go from Eastern Kentucky with the mountains and all of those different type of microhabitats and different types of soils, to the bluegrass with all of our limestone soils, and then all the way over to the Mississippi River. So we're a really long state from east to west. So we got a great diversity from that. And we're kind of a nice meeting point between north and south as far as latitude goes. So we get a lot of different tree species that are native to Kentucky. So it can make tree ID a little bit tricky. Trees, as you all know, are super important. They take in carbon dioxide and they give off oxygen. They clean our air, and they do this in the process of photosynthesis, taking in that carbon, utilizing water, the sunlight energy, and then it makes sugar, or the food for the tree, and releases oxygen as a byproduct, which is vital to us. They help clean our water. They protect our water by preventing soil erosion. And they also provide shade to all of our stream courses, which are really important to the wildlife that live there as well. They're great habitat for wildlife. As we can see here with our little screech owl, not only do they provide food for some wildlife, we think of our squirrels and some of our other birds, they also provide a home for things like our cavity nesters. They provide recreation. Our trees are forest as a unit, and recreation is a huge thing in this state. From people who are just out wildlife viewing, they just want to go for a hike, then mountain biking, to hunting, to fishing. So our trees and our forests are really important for that. And then we can't forget all of the products. We're all probably sitting in some facility, a room, at a desk, in a chair, or something that has some type of wood product in it. And there are thousands and thousands of wood products out there. They estimate anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 different products. And if you look over on the little picture, there's your typical ones, your wood, and then wood fibers, but there's all kinds of stuff that are in our plastics, that are in some of our clothing and our food, that even come from trees as well. And then lastly, food. I don't know about all of you all, but would love nothing better than an apple or a plum tree. So yes, they also provide food for us as well. So in Kentucky, our trees and forests, about half of our state is forested. As you can see in this map, a good portion of it is in the eastern half with the darker green, but we've got a lot of green all across that state. And equates to about 12.4 million acres, and about 80% of that are owned by private individuals, family farms, family woodlands, and whatnot. We do have some publicly owned forests with our Daniel Boone National Forest that runs north to south right here on the edge of the eastern Kentucky. And then we've got over here by Land Between the Lakes as well, as in addition to some other publicly managed forests. And then our forests are extremely important. We mentioned the products. Well, in Kentucky, our Kentucky forestry sector contributed more than $9 billion to the state's economy in 2021-22, as you can see in the top graph, and it provided over 25,000 direct jobs. I mean, it's really, really important to our economy. And a lot of times we don't even think about all of that goes on, especially if we don't see it every day. But we have some type of forest industry in almost every county in the state. Okay, so that was our little bit of background. So now let's learn how to identify these tremendous organisms. So today we're going to focus on using a dichotomous leaf key, and we're actually going to use this little guy right here. It's called a tree finder, and it's a manual for the identification of trees by their leaves. And this was a little pocket tree finder that was put together in the early 1960s, actually, and it is still extremely relevant today. Very economical at about $5 a pop, fits in your back pocket or a shirt pocket, so it's easy to carry out in the field. It does include about 70 native trees that we find east of the Mississippi, so it's appropriate for us to use. And it is a tree finder, but it's using the leaves. They do make there are several other finders. There's ones that you can use that when trees don't have their leaves, and it's called the twig finder. But if you've not used a dichotomous key before, many of you probably have in a science class, maybe not with trees, maybe you've used it with insects or something else, but it's simply a logical sequence to identifying for us the tree in interest. It's dichotomous. Things are going to be in set to two. It's going to ask us two questions. You'll answer those questions or find the appropriate statement, and then it's going to lead you to two more questions or statements, and you're going to find whichever matches the organism you're at, and it eventually narrows it down and takes you to an array of what could potentially be your organism. So it's a great little tool to use, and we'll actually go through using that for a couple of tree species. So when we're looking at trees and using this tool, we got to think about some of our tree characteristics. That's where we've got to start. And leaves are the easiest place to start. That's where almost any dendrology class that if you would take in college, it's going to start with using the leaves to help you identify the tree. That's the easiest to get to, the easiest to work with. But you can use the twigs and buds, and sometimes those are what you run into in the obviously late fall, winter, early spring. And really, if you've learned to do tree identification using leaves, once you go to twigs and buds, it really, for me, it's cemented. It made me really be able to see that whole tree. You can use the flowers or seasonally, obviously, and fruit also seasonal. And then the bark, and bark is a great one for certain species, but bark's one of those things that does change as that, for some trees, as that tree grows. It'll look one way when it's really young, and then as that tree grows, it may become more furrowed or smoother or even change in color. So we're going to focus on leaves today. So when you're using a dichotomous key, the very first step that you'll come to is it's asking something about the leaves. And it's going to ask you if it's got needle type leaves like this. So like our eastern white pine or our eastern red cedar, those are needle type leaves. Or does it have broad leaves? And broad leaves we would consider are deciduous. We're going to lose most of these coming up real soon here. Are deciduous leaves. That broad leaf, it's a broad flat leaf. So that's usually the first big division. And once you've answered that, then we're going to start looking at some other characteristics. But so does it have needles or does it have broad leaves? But there's one thing I've wanted to point out. You want to make sure that you look at several leaves or groups of needles on a tree, because they are not usually the same, and it can be different for a variety of reasons. One, where it's growing the tree, is it in the shade, is it exposed to more sun, maybe an insect's chewed on it or something. But here's a great example. Here's a black oak. Good big broad leaf there. Now there's a black oak, and it doesn't look nearly as broad. It's got much deeper sinuses and much broader lobes. And then this is a black oak, and this one almost looks like it's an evergreen. It's so shiny. So you want to make sure that you look at multiple leaves and multiple sets of needles if you're looking at an evergreen or needle type tree. And we'll quickly go over our needle type trees or conifers that we find in Kentucky. We only have 7 or 8 that are native to Kentucky, so they're kind of easy to do. Now that out in our landscape, in our neighborhoods, so you'll find lots more because we have all kinds of ornamentals that have been planted. But in a native setting, we'll find for our species, we're going to find needles that are going to be scale-like, or we're going to find needles that are singly arranged, or we're going to find needles that are in bundles. So those are the characteristics we're going to use when we're looking at needle type trees, or conifers as we call them, because these are cone bearing trees. They're going to bear cones, and they are usually evergreen. We have one exception, usually evergreen. They will lose their needles, but they lose them slowly over 3 or 4 years, and they never lose them all at once unless something's happened to the tree, with the exception of bald cypress. But let's take a look at some of the pictures. For eastern red cedar and northern white cedar, those are the scale-like type needles. And you can see with eastern red cedar, it has on its new growth out here, as I'm moving the cursor over it, those will tend to be the sharp, prickly ones. And with our northern white cedar, it doesn't have new growth like that, no sharp, prickly new growth. So we have both eastern red cedar and northern white cedar in the state, far more eastern red cedar. We're kind of on the southern edge of northern white cedar, but northern white cedar is planted a fair amount around cemeteries and whatnot. And then we've got our singly arranged, these are singly connected to the stem, eastern hemlock. So you can see we've got one needle that's attached directly to the stem. Our eastern hemlock, a wonderful tree, which is under attack from the hemlock woolly adelgid, which you'll probably learn more if you join us for our invasive species webinar in the next day or so. And then there's bald cypress, individually attached needles. And this is our conifer that is deciduous. It's going to lose all of its needles here coming soon, and they'll grow them all back in the spring. And then there's eastern white pine, super common tree in our landscape. Love to plant it as a screen type tree, but its needles are always in groups of 5 unless something's happened and one of them's fallen off. But you can see as I'm pointing the cursor here, there's like a little wooden cup, and it holds all of those needles together, and they'll be in groups of 5. And then there's pitch pine. Now this is going to be more of a forested tree. Don't usually find it much in the landscape plantings. It is one of our true southern yellow pines. And we do find it in eastern Kentucky a lot. We'll find it out in the woods. And its needles are always going to be in groups of 3. And they'll be about 3 inches long. And the one you might confuse it with is shortleaf pine. The two are both forest trees, southern yellow pines. They look very much, if you just look at the trunk, look very similar. The difference between these is that short pitch pine, this one only has needles in groups of 3. Shortleaf pine has needles in groups of 2s and 3s. So that's why you want to make sure you look at multiple sets of needles. But you can see again how they're in these little wooden cups, and the fancy name for that is a fascicle. And then lastly, we've got Virginia pine. And this, we also know it as scrub pine. It's the one that will grow at the very top of the ridge top, grows along road cuts and whatnot, because it can grow just about anywhere. It's a real hardy little pine. And its needles are always in groups of 2, and they'll be pretty short, 2 inches, and they have much, much smaller cones than our other ones. So those are our needle type trees, or our conifers that we would find in Kentucky. And the Tree Finder, the little book, does actually have all of those trees in there. That's going to be in the first part of the key, so we won't go through any of those. But some of the characteristics that we're going to use when we're using our Tree Finder or our dichotomous key when we're looking at leaves. Remember the first one, are they needles or are they leaves? And the next we're going to look at how that leaf is arranged on the stem. We're going to look at the leaf form. We're going to look at what the edges of that leaf looks like, the margin. Potentially leaf tips. Does it have bristle tips? Does it have a hair-like tip? Does it go to a point type thing? And then sometimes the base. What does the base of that leaf look like? We're also going to be focusing a little bit on the buds because the buds are really helpful in determining the leaf arrangement and leaf form. So when you do tree ID first thing in the spring, sometimes it can be a little bit tough because buds have not been set for the next year. So the way our tree would grow, it's going to grow its leaf. As you can see, these are leaf scars. I've got them labeled here. That was the leaf there during the growing season. And then there is a bud that has been set in the base of that. That'll be next year's leaf. And so the buds are the locations of the new stems, fruits, and leaves. So we have lateral buds, and those will be the ones that the leaves on the side of the branch. And then there'll be your terminal bud. And this is responsible for shoot elongation, making that branch longer. Plus there's bud material and even sometimes flower material in that as well. So those will be useful, like I said, for leaf arrangement and leaf form. So as we said, step one was, are they needles or broadleaf? Step two is our leaf arrangement. And we've got 3 different kinds of leaf arrangement that we'll be looking at. The first one we'll tackle is our opposite. And you can see these leaves are arranged opposite leaf on this twig right across from each other. Just think of them like right across the street. And we have 4 groups of trees now, not just 4 individuals, but 4 groups of trees that have oppositely arranged trees that are native to Kentucky. We have maples, we have ashes, we have dogwoods, and we have buckeye. So if you can remember the mnemonic mad buck, maple, ash, dogwood, buckeye, you can remember the trees that have oppositely arranged leaves. Now remember, we have 7 or 8 different types of maples, numerous types of ash, numerous types of dogwood, and we do have 2 buckeyes. So that's lots of different trees, but at least that'll help get you down to, oh, it's oppositely arranged. I've got a maple, ash, dogwood, or buckeye. And then most of our remaining species are going to be alternately arranged. And alternately just means they zigzag on that. They alternate or zigzagged on that stem. As you can see, they're not across from one another. And think about our oaks are like that. Think about, I was going to say, let's see, I'm stumped right now. Oaks, some of our magnolias are that way. Those will be examples of trees that have alternately arranged leaves. And then we do have one that has whorled leaves, and they actually whorl all around that stem, and that's our northern catalpa. And you all may be familiar with the trees that have that really long, skinny seed pod on it and kind of the large heart-shaped leaf, and that's a northern catalpa. And it will have whorled leaves around the stem. So let's look at a few photos so we can see alternately arranged leaves. You can see the bud, right? Nice, sharp, big bud on this American beech here. And that leaf is right below it. So there's a leaf there. We've got a bud here, leaf there. But you see how they zigzag, they alternate on that twig. Or we have oppositely arranged right here. And you can see the leaf is right next to each other, as are the buds on this red maple right here. Remember, the maples have oppositely arranged leaves. Okay, so that was leaf arrangement. Step 3, the leaf is looking at our leaf form. And this one's a little bit harder. And this is one that's easier once we get into about later in May and June when trees have start to set buds. So that'll really help you be able to determine if you have a simple or a compound leaf. But the way it works is on a simple leaf, you're going to look at the blade, and that's what we call the broad part of it, the blade, and you're going to go down its little stem or a leaf petiole, and you'll see if there's a bud there. And if there is a bud and there's just one blade, you're going to have a simple leaf. An oak would be an example of a tree with a simple leaf. An elm would be an example of a tree with a simple leaf. So would a maple, most maples. But now if you come over to this example right here, you look at the base of what you think are your leaves. Here's your flat blade right here, and you're not finding any buds down there. So you move on down this stem, additional stems, and you find that your bud is all the way down here. So what you've determined now is I've got a compound leaf. And these are actually called leaflets. They're no longer, this whole thing is a leaf, and it is composed of 5 leaflets. And a leaflet will not have a bud at the base of it. And this one's called palmately compound because it's kind of like your hand. An example of that would be our buckeyes. They have palmately compound leaves. And then we come over to this one and we're looking at the base of what we think are our leaves, these little, the broad flat blade, and we're not finding any buds, and we keep moving down and moving down that leaf stem. And we find that our buds all the way down here. So we know we have a compound leaf, and this one's called pinnately compound. So it's pinnate like a feather. Those leaves are on each side of that leaf stem, and it's got multiple leaflets on here. And ash trees are examples of this. So is all of our hickories, as well as our black walnut would be an example of a pinnately compound tree. But your bud's going to be all the way down here, not at the base of the leaflets. And now this one's a big leaf. And we have a couple of species that do have bipinnately or doubly compound leaves. So you're looking at what you think are your leaves, and you're not finding any buds at the base of these. And you move down there thinking, okay, I got a pinnately compound, but there's no buds down there. You keep moving all the way down this leaf stem, and you find your bud is all the way down here. And it will be a large bud because that is a large leaf. And so you determine that you have a bipinnately or doubly pinnately compound leaf that has lots and lots of leaflets. Examples of this would be Kentucky coffee tree, which is our state heritage tree. So let's take a look at a few of these in actual photographs. So we have a black gum specimen here, and we see we've got buds right here. And if we look at our bud and we see from that bud, and we go up the stem, we see we have one blade. Or we even do it in reverse. We look at the blade and we go down that stem and we see we have a bud. So we've only got one blade and one bud. So we have a simple leaf. So now let's look at this one. This is a black walnut, and we see we've got a bud there, and a bud there. And you notice these are pretty large buds because these are large leaves. And even if you would have started up here on what you thought was your leaf, you wouldn't find any buds here. You'd move all the way down this leaf stem and you'd find your bud down here. And this whole thing is a leaf that is made up of multiple leaflets. So this is an example of a compound leaf, our black walnut. All right. So next, let's look at leaf margins. So step one, was it needles or was it broadleaf? Step two, how was it ranged? Alternately or opposite? Step three, we wanted to know, is it a simple leaf or a compound leaf? And in step four, it's going to ask us about what the edge of that leaf looks like, what its margins look like. So we can have lobed or entire leaves. So there's, unlobed or entire leaves like this one right here. So we don't have any indentations to create lobes. Same here, nice, smooth, entire, there's no teeth on it and there's no lobing. Or we can have a lobed leaf. And these are examples of our oak trees who have, almost all of our oaks have lobed. We do have a few species that don't have lobed leaves, but the part that sticks out is the lobe. You can see it here, it's got points on it. Down here, it's got rounded lobes, and the indentations, we call this sinuses on that. But our red oaks will have bristle-tipped lobes. As you can actually see, there's like little hairs at the tips of those lobes. So all of our red oaks, which we have multiple different types of red oaks, and then we have multiple different types of white oaks. We got 21 different types of oaks that are native to Kentucky. But white oaks are going to have rounded lobes. There's not going to be any bristle tips on those. And then we can have leaves that have serrations. And when you think about serrations, think about a knife, butter knife, steak knife, bread knife, those types of things, little teeth all along the edge of that leaf. And those will vary depending on species. You can have some that are more rounded, some that look sharper, some like this one, you can actually see the vein goes all the way up between each one of those teeth. This one, it's not quite so uniform. And then we can have trees that have lobes, as with this red maple, it has 3 lobes, and these are pointed lobes, 1, 2, 3, but it's also got teeth all along the edge of that leaf. They're irregular, not nice and neat like over in this sample here, but irregular teeth all along the edges of its leaf. So you can have lobed and serrated as well. Okay. Hopefully you remember that. Test time. Is this a conifer or a broadleaf? Hopefully everybody's going conifer. It's a needle type tree. So yes, how about this? Is this opposite or alternate? This one's easy to see, buds and leaf stem. Hopefully everybody got that it's opposite. Good deal. Alternate or opposite, talking about leaf arrangement still. Do we think these leaves are alternate or opposite? Hopefully everybody's seeing that they are alternate. You can see we got a leaf here and a bud there, and then we zag down here, alternate down here for our next one. All right, is this a simple or a compound leaf? A little trickier, but we picked out one that's got nice yellow, sulfur yellow buds. We can see there's our bud there. So this is a compound leaf. This is actually bitternut hickory, one of our hickories. Okay, now we're looking at leaf margins. Is this a lobed leaf or an unlobed leaf? Well, we use it as an example, so hopefully everybody got it's a lobed leaf. And this actually is a type, it is one of our white oaks because it has the rounded lobes. All right, so is this statement true or false? This leaf is lobed, it's serrated, and compound. Well, I see a bud here, a stem, and one blade, so we know it's not compound. We don't see any serrations, and I don't see any lobing. It looks pretty entire, so hopefully everybody said that's false. All right, which of the following doesn't fit the sequence? We've got A, we've got B, we've got C, and we've got D. And I can't see in the chat, but hopefully if anybody, or you're thinking to yourself, well, A, B, and D all have serrated or teeth-like margins and C does not. So you find that C doesn't fit the sequence. We've got our American beech here, and we've got I'm just lost the name of my head, but we do have our winning one right here is it's Saltus occidentalis hackberry. Thank you. Couldn't remember the name. But this one that is entire and doesn't have any teeth on it is from our pawpaw. Okay, so now we can see a dichotomous key in action. We went through the steps and we're going to look at, this is super abbreviated. We're going to use the book next, but we'll start with this one, super abbreviated. So we start at A or B or one, and we start at A, or if it says one, or we start here, wherever it tells us to start. And so the very first set of statements or questions, it asks us, just like we remember, does it have needles or does the tree have leaves? And this is our sample. Hopefully everybody says it's got leaves. So now we're going to go down to the next set of statements or questions, and it's going to ask us about leaf arrangement. How are those leaves arranged on that twig? Are they arranged oppositely? Are they arranged alternately? Well, we can see we actually got circles where the buds are. We've got here, we alternate on this side, up here, and we alternate there. So hopefully everybody sees that those are alternately arranged leaves. So now it sends us down to the statements at C. It's asking us about leaf form. Are these simple leaves or are they compound leaves? Well, we look at where we've circled, and these buds are tiny because these are not big leaves. But we see there is a little bud kind of enclosed in the base of that leaf stem, and we see one blade. So we have a simple leaf. Now it tells us to go down to F, and it's given us an answer. It tells us that what we're identifying right here is a serviceberry, one of our lovely little kind of smaller understory trees that we find out in the forest. A beautiful tree, lovely color, and great berries that birds just absolutely love. All right, so now let's get out. You remember our dichotomous, the manual for identifying trees by their leaves, our little $5 manual, fits in your pocket. I've opened it up to page 5 where it says start here. And we're going to try to identify this sample that we have right here. And so again, the first question, does the tree have needles or does the tree have leaves? Hopefully we see we have nice broad leaves. So now we're going to go over to page 14, and we want to remember what that symbol looks like. And it's kind of that stylized tree, or the lollipop tree. So we'll flip over to page 14 and we're going to look for that logo, because that's where our next set of statements or questions are going to be. And we find it's at the top. Now it's asking us about leaf arrangement. If the leaves or buds grow opposite like this, and it even gives you an example in case you kind of forget what that meant. Or if the leaves or the buds grow alternately like this, and it shows you with this little drawing what that might mean. And I've done some circling on our leaves to kind of help it stand out. And hopefully everybody sees that these leaves are arranged alternately on that twig. As you see, they kind of zig or alternate on that twig, that we have alternately arranged leaves. So let's remember what that alternately arranged symbol looks like and go over to page 21 now. We'll flip over to 21, and that bracket's in the middle this time. So we're going to look for the statements at that bracket with the alternately arranged twigs or leaves there. Now it's asking us about our leaf form. Do we have leaves if the leaves are compound, and it even describes to you what compound is in case you forget, and that they're composed of several leaflets, and you can tell leaves from leaflets because there is no bud at the base of the leaflet. Or if the leaf is simple and not composed of leaflets. Well, and I've done a little highlighting for you because the buds are small. These aren't real big leaves, but we do have a very small little bud. It's kind of somewhat enclosed in the leaf stem back here and circled in red. And we see our leaf stem and we have one blade. So we know we have a simple leaf. So we're going to follow our simple leaf logo over to page 28. And it's going to be the second set of brackets down at the bottom of the page. Now it's asking us about leaf margin. If the leaf has neither teeth nor lobes, you want to go to the next page. Or if the leaf has teeth of any kind or a wavy margin or lobes. When we look at this, we don't see any teeth and we don't see any lobes. In fact, it was our example for a leaf that was entire and unlobed. So we know we have a tree that doesn't have any teeth or lobes. So we're going to follow that kind of plain symbol over to the next page, and it's the top bracket. Now it's asking us a little bit about the ends of our leaves, the tips of our leaves, which we didn't talk about, and it doesn't come up real often, but it asks if the leaf is tipped with a single bristle like that of the tip of the needle, or if the leaf has no bristle at its tip. The leaf may be pointed or not. And you'll see a bristle tip, like when we looked at that example of our red oaks with that hair-like bristle at the tip. And I know it's not the best of pictures, but there isn't a bristle tip on this one. So we know we don't have one with a bristle tip. So we'll follow our little logo of the unbristle tipped leaf over to the next page. And it's the top bracket. And now it's asking us about kind of leaf shape. And we might potentially have an answer here because we see it's giving us a potential answer. It asks if the leaf is heart-shaped with veins branching from the base, or if the leaf is not heart-shaped. Well, let's look. It looks somewhat heart-shaped. I mean, it's not super heart-shaped, but when we look at our sample over here, there's an arrow from this red bud drawn to this leaf right here. It looks very much like that leaf. And in fact, if we look at the second part of that statement, it asks if the leaf has veins branching from the base. So let's look. We can see our veins from the base of the leaf. We can see all of those veins in that leaf are branching from the base of that leaf. So we feel pretty confident in saying that this is pretty heart-shaped. We have all of our veins branching from the base of that leaf, and it looks like the example that they have the arrow pointing to, that we have a redbud, an eastern redbud, Cercis canadensis, which is its scientific name. It may have multiple different common names like eastern redbud, or something like that. Many trees do. They'll have multiple common names, but they only have one scientific name. And we can look at a picture of our eastern redbud. Beautiful, lovely pink flowers. This is a tree that flowers before the leaf comes out. And just think of it like the mist of spring. Spring is upon us when we start to see these great pink flowers. It is in the pea family, or the Leguminosae or Fabaceae family. So its fruit actually looks like a bean pod. And right now that's what we'd see on the trees. We still have the leaves, and we're going to see some of those fruit pods out there, but it is a great little understory tree that we find throughout our forest, and we use it a lot in landscape. It's a great accent tree, especially if you don't have a big landscape and you just want something kind of small, splash of color, some leaves out there in the summertime. And a really pretty hardy tree, grows well in most sites. So that was our eastern redbud, and hopefully everybody got that, was able to walk through that. But let's do one more just so we feel a little more secure in this, because I do want to mention there are other walks. There are going to be 2 other walks later this week looking at trees. One I know is Wednesday at the Arboretum, and then Sunday they're actually doing a tree identification walk at Mintel Park. So you can, if you've done this, even if you don't have one of these books, you can go out and actually look at some of these characteristics up close and personal. But let's try to identify this pretty leaf right here. All right, we start on page 5 again, gone back in our book to page 5 where it says start here. Now it's asking us, does this tree have needles or does this tree have leaves? Hopefully everybody sees those beautiful, broad, fall colored leaves. So we're going to follow our leaf symbol over to page 14. Now it's asking us if the leaves or buds grow opposite like this, or do the leaves or buds grow alternately like this? Remember, the second question is always about leaf arrangement. So I've got it circled for us so we can see, and hopefully everybody sees clearly that these leaves are oppositely arranged. You can even see the little buds in the base of those leaves. So we've got one that's oppositely arranged this time, and hopefully you all remember oppositely arranged leaves: mad buck, maple, ash, dogwood, or buckeye. So it's going to be one of those. So we're not even leaving the page. We're just going to follow our symbol down to the next set of brackets. Now it's asking us about leaf form, and it asks if the leaves are compound and composed of several leaflets, or are the leaves simple and not composed of several leaflets. Well, as we can see, we've got a bud right here, and I was going to say, I think a bud right here. We have one stem, and then we've got one blade. So that tells us we have a simple leaf. All right, so that's 18. So now we're going to go over to page 18 and follow that simple leaf logo as opposed to the compound leaf logo over to page 18. Okay, so top bracket. Now it's asking us about some of the veins and to help us kind of determine if we have lobes. So we're looking at so this is more of a margins question, if each leaf has a single main vein with smaller side veins and without teeth or lobes. And so you can kind of see the little diagram. Think of like a feather. Is it pinnate? Those little veins pinnate from one another right across. Or if each leaf has 3 to 7 main veins radiating from one point and it's lobed. Well, we can look at it and we can see this. We've got lobes on this, and they're pointed lobes, and we've got several of them. But let's check on our veins. We see at least 3, and more than that, actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's telling us we got 3 nice, big, easy ones to see, and then we've got 2 smaller ones down here. So if it has 3 to 7 main veins radiating, we know it's a maple. So we're going to go below. Now we got to figure out what kind of maple this is. So if the notches between the lobes are V-shaped, and that's going to be pretty sharply V-shaped, or if the notches are U-shaped. And this is where it's important that you look at multiple leaves, because this top one, to me, that doesn't look V-shaped, that looks U-shaped. And this one definitely over here on the right looks U-shaped, as does this one down here. But at a quick glance, you might go, oh yeah, that looks V-shaped. So that's why you want to look at multiple leaves and get a, not just one quick glance. But we do have U-shaped notches, or as I referred to them before as sinuses between the lobes. So now we want to go to this U-shaped notch or sinus over to page 20, and it's the bottom bracket. And we know we're going to have an answer because there's no more questions after this. So the first statement or question, it asks if the leaf stem shows a milky juice when broken. And I know you can't see that because you don't actually have a sample, but if you're out in the field, you could check this. And the leaf is usually wider than long, and the base is not wavy or curvy. Okay, well, let's look. We can't check on the leaf stem, but we can look at the base. We've got a base that's wavy or curvy. Look at that. You can actually see it dips down and goes up to the top of the leaf stem, and it dips down again. Okay, so let's read our second statement. If there is no milky juice and the leaf is about as long as it is wide and the base of the leaf is curving, it's a sugar maple. So the base of our leaf curves, and if we actually measure it out, and you see that it's about as tall or long as it is wide. And if you're out in the field, you may go, how can I figure that out? Well, on the tree finders, they have a ruler on the back of them, so you can use that. It only goes up to about 6 or 7 inches, but it is helpful. And something for this leaf, it would be very helpful. You can measure the difference in the width and the length of that leaf. And we have a sugar maple, and this is very typical colors of our sugar maples. They get those lovely oranges to yellows in the fall. So hopefully that helped you all kind of start looking at some of these characteristics of our leaves. But just to say a little bit about our sugar maple, it's a great tree native to Kentucky. We have it throughout our woods. It is planted a lot in our landscape because it is a lovely shade tree, lovely fall color. Has nice spring flowers. All of our maples do. They're small, but they're lovely all the same. And we love it for our maple syrup. We do use, all of our trees can be tapped for syrup, but our maples tend to be the sweetest, and sugar maple is this, it's got the sweetest sap, the highest sugar content in that sap. The wood is also really important as well. It's also, we call it hard maple or rock maple because it's very hard wood on our sugar maples as compared to red maple. Red maple we would call soft maple. It's a much softer wood, but sugar maple has hard wood, and we use it in basketball courts. As you can see here, we use it in bowling alleys. And they're actually looking at sugar maple and have been making baseball bats out of sugar maple because it's not terribly heavy. It's very resistant, shock resistant, as a replacement for using white ash, because, you know, with the onset of the emerald ash borer, our baseball bats, all our wooden bats, were traditionally made with white ash wood. So sugar maple is one of the species they're looking at as an alternative to ash trees. So hopefully, looking at some of these characteristics, you remember, do we have needles or do we have broad leaves? How is that leaf arranged? Is it alternate? Is it opposite? Is it a compound leaf? Is it a simple leaf? What does the edges of those leaves look like? That will really help you all in being able to use, that's the simple tool of the dichotomous key, to identify the trees in your yard, maybe in a neighborhood park, or if you go out on a tree walk with some friends. So hopefully you found that useful. I will say, if you get the opportunity, go out while it's still kind of fresh. Maybe pick up the book. They're $5 or so usually on Amazon. But there's some other tree ID resources you all can use. And I wanted to point out iNaturalist. For those of you who like to take your phone out, which don't most of us usually, you can use iNaturalist, which is a free app that you can download onto your phone. You snap a picture of that leaf, and it's not a dichotomous key. It's going to give you a multiple of choices with an image in there, and you're going to pick the one that it looks most like. So it's not a tree, it's not a dichotomous key, but it is very helpful. Virginia Tech Tree ID, they do have a website and a app that you can download. This is a very robust app on your phone. They'll have more than 400 species. So sometimes in a phone-like setting, when you're standing out in the woods, it can be a lot to go through. I find it super helpful if I take a picture or grab a sample, bring it back inside and sit down at my computer, because it's all photo driven. They've done photographs for all of this, and it got, like I said, there's more than 400 species in there. Very robust. There's Arbor Day tree identification. You can do it online. They also have an Arbor Day tree key that you can purchase as well. It's bigger than the tree finder, doesn't quite fit in your pocket. You've watched this and you're like, I can't remember some of the stuff she was talking about. We've got videos up on each one of these segments about, you know, looking at conifers, how the needles are arranged, how leaves are arranged, if it's a compound leaf, a simple leaf. So we've got little short videos on those that are easy to access if you'd like to review, or even use it with maybe a group that you want to help learn and teach about tree identification. We also have on our UK Forestry and Natural Resources Extension YouTube channel, the Tree of the Week. We started during COVID doing a different Tree of the Week, and we've got about 80 different trees up there. And it does include all of this identification, but it includes a lot of other additional resources, kind of where that tree grows, what kind of soils it grows in, what kind of sunlight does it need? Is it shade tolerant, intolerant? You know, what kind of water does it need? Plus a lot of fun facts. Trees are just tremendous, and there's a lot of ethnobotany associated with them, and you can learn some of that, and then learn about the champion trees that we have all around the country, and find out where the ones are in Kentucky as well. And then our Department of Horticulture here at UK also has a wonderful site. They have about 80 different tree fact sheets of native trees of Kentucky. And they'll talk a lot about how you can use those trees in your landscape if it's something you're interested in planting. So that's a great resource as well. And then I wanted to mention a few books for those who kind of like the paper version. The Tree Finder that I mentioned. There's also the Winter Tree Finder, which this is the twigs. they have multiple of these finders. There's one for wildflowers, there's one for butterflies, but these are the ones that I've used the most, and I've used both of these quite a bit, and they're quite handy and inexpensive and pocket sized. And then there's also FOR1, Identifying Kentucky's Forest Trees. And that you can actually purchase through us here at the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources. It's $3. It's got about 80 different trees in it, and they're grouped by their genus. So it'll have all the oaks together, it'll have all the elms together, all the hickories together. And we have made a dichotomous key that we've put in the front of that will get you to the family. And from there, you need to figure it out. But it's a great resource. It's got lovely line drawings in it and a lot of other facts, where it grows, what kind of wildlife uses it, how we have utilized it, usually in a wood product type setting. And then there's a great one. This is a hardback book, not something you're going to probably carry around out in the field, but it has trees throughout the season. So it's trees and shrubs. So we're going to pick up some shrubs now too, of Kentucky by Mary Wharton and Roger Barber. And so it starts out with what the flower looks like, what the leaves look like, what the form looks like. So, stand back from the tree so you can see how big or how small. Is it a sparsely canopied type tree? If it's got thorns, and what the fall leaf color is on it. So it's a great resource to have once you've really kind of gotten into this. So it really kind of, you kind of go back and refer to it. And I love that. There's also Wildflowers and Ferns of Kentucky that I would highly recommend from Mary Wharton and Roger Barber as well. And then lastly, if you totally get into this and you want to really get into dendrology, there's North American Trees. There may be a newer edition than the 5th edition, but this was the book that we used in dendrology when I was in school, and it has trees from all across the country. There's 800 different species in there. And for each family group, there is a dichotomous key in that. And it's a great resource, but again, not probably something you'd carry out in the field. So hopefully everybody found this to be a helpful, somewhat hands-on, even though we're doing this via webinar session today. And maybe you'll get the opportunity to go out. Like I said, there are two more walks, and there may be some others, especially if you're not here in Fayette County, others that you could go visit. I know there's the one at the Arboretum on Wednesday. I think it's 5 to 7. And then on Sunday, it is actually a tree identification walk, and it is at Mintel Park. So that could be an opportunity for, you've done this, you sit and listen, to go out and actually look at some of those trees.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laurie, for your great presentation. Fantastic. As usual, it makes me want to get out there and find some trees.
Absolutely. And now is it, we still have leaves, the color's starting to happen. So it's a great
time. It gets a lot harder in like a month from now.
Yes, it's going to be a whole lot harder. Yeah. So do it now while the leaves are out.
And, if you have any questions for Laurie, please put those in the chat. But also, I want to encourage you to let us know what you think of, today, as well as Tree Week in general. We want to hear from you about this webinar and others. So I will put a link in the chat to kind of receive some feedback from you on this. And I see a question in the chat right now. Where can we find a recording of this presentation? I encourage you to check out our YouTube pages. Forestry Extension, University of Kentucky has some fantastic videos, the ones that Laurie mentioned and others. This whole series will be recorded and made available online as well. So that'll be on the Forest Health Extension YouTube page.
Right. And I was going to say, LaDonna had a question on when's the best time to do a 4-H forestry leaf collection. And so these little resources that I showed you today are great to use with youth. One, they're not terribly expensive, but it does help you identify that. But to do a leaf collection, and I know sometimes your county fairs can mess this up, but you want to not do it first thing in the spring because the leaves haven't fully unfurled and are at their best size. But I usually shoot for the end of May, beginning of June. As we start getting later in the summer, You can still do it. You'll just have to be a little pickier because a lot of little bugs and stuff start eating on our leaves as we get further into the summer, and so you get some bites and chews out of them. But yeah, if you could do it end of May into early part of June, it's great. I'll also mention doing the leaf collection. We've got a couple of videos on our 4-H website that kind of walks you through how to do the leaf collection with an instruction step by step. But you can also do leaf prints, and that is a 4-H state, county and state fair opportunity. If you don't want to have to press your leaves, you can actually collect your leaf and follow. We've got a video up on how to do a leaf print. You simply ink the underside, the part where the veins are, and you put that down on a nice clean white piece of paper. Voila, you have your leaf print collection, and don't have to sit on those leaves for 2 or 3 weeks before you actually mount them. So, but yeah, check those out on our 4-H website. And I know you can get to that through our UK Department of Forestry Natural Resources under Youth in Forestry. And you click on those and you can find out how to do some of those. And I thought I saw something else pop up about where was a tree walk. Where is it's at Mintel Park. And if you go to, John, I was going to say, go to the Tree Week 2023, go down through their schedule because it's Sunday. It's all the way at the bottom. There'll probably be directions. And I don't really actually even know what time it is. I just saw that it was a tree ID walk, and Mintel Park is here in Lexington.
And if you're somewhere else in Kentucky, check out the Tree Week website. Yes. And you might have tree walks or other great things in your community as well. We had a question that came up yesterday, Laurie, that I wanted to get your thoughts on. I thought it was a good question. What is your favorite tree right now, and a tree that you think people should check out?
Oh, gosh, that's always a tough one because I'm always torn. I love sourwood. It's a beautiful tree this time of year. It becomes very bright, vibrant red, and it has where its flowers had been, it's like a dangly dried seed pod, and it looks really cool. It's got it looks like tassels on it. So it's a beautiful tree, forested tree, and occasionally you'll see it in a landscape. In the spring, I'm a big sucker for a yellowwood. Love it. The flowers are beautiful. Even black locust, those are beautiful flowers. And throughout the summer, I love a yellow poplar too.
I know.
Yep.
I love a
Great
yellow
shade
poplar
tree
as well.
Yep. Yep.
There's so many good ones. It's
yes, I know. It's
choose.
Like you got to have them for all seasons. So.
So I put in the chat, hopefully everyone can access that and hopefully goes to the right place, a link to our webinar series where you can catch not only this webinar, but all the other webinars from this week will be posted there. So check that out. And also don't forget to check out Laurie's Tree of the Week series. That is really great. And if you like what you're seeing in this series, I want to encourage you to, make sure to check out the other webinars that we've got this week. We've got one coming this afternoon, Best Evergreens for the Bluegrass. And if you know anything about planting evergreens in the bluegrass, it's that it's a challenge. We don't have a lot.
It's going to be a good one. I'm anxious to listen to that seminar. So.
Yeah, we have a lot that struggle in our area due to the weather and the soil and various kind of diseases. But some tips on the best evergreens for you, but also other great webinars. We've got one coming up with Kelly Jackson from Christian County talking about how to effectively water landscape trees. Lots of great topics. Yeah, super important.
It is, yeah.
And if you like what you're seeing on this show, check out From the Woods Today, our weekly webcast program. We do this every week with different topics. You can catch up with me and Laurie, Renee, and Billy, and others from our Forestry and Natural Resources Extension team. So with that, we're going to wrap up today's webinar, but hope to see you soon.
Yes. Happy Tree Week, everyone.
Happy Tree Week. Get out there and enjoy it. Show those trees some love. Yes. And maybe make some new friends. Meet some new trees that Laurie's introduced you to today.
Thanks.